Hey guys, when last we left our party, I have my notes here. This is going to be a little bit all over the place because we have a few things going on over the last few sessions. So, first of all, one of the first significant things that happened was the former minister of the Navarre Confederacy, Lunacha of Seeker, was kidnapped by Snarg. Now, she was rescued by Zerial, but Zerial and Guido both pretty much played full-on hardball with her. They were like, look, you can work for us and you can drop the act, or we'll kill you, or we'll kill you slowly, or we'll kill you terribly, or we'll kill you horribly. And you know how it is when Zerial and Guido get in a room together. They are both, of course, pure evil. I mean, after all, Zerial literally wanted to wipe out all of the Osteth and replace them with a Tusker. So, I mean, okay, that's a lie. It's not true. But the point being, Lunacha didn't respond well to this. It took the party a while to really get the point, because they thought she was BSing them. But the truth is a little bit more complicated than that. What was actually happening here was she was terrified out of her mind because she's an administrator. She's not even a proper politician. She's really good at her job, at administrating other people. That's actually what the purpose of the Prime Minister is in the Navarre Confederacy, after all. They're not in charge of the Confederacy. They are there to help keep the governors coordinating with and interacting with each other at all times. And given the disparate nature of the different states of the Confederacy, and the fact that they all have different customs and different cultures, and different needs and different wants and different grievances, keeping all that balanced is a full-time job. And that's what Lunacha Seeker was doing. So she's an administrator. Zerial and Guido both pick up on this pretty quickly, actually, and they realize she would be a tremendous asset if used properly. Now, you might be thinking, hang on. How did Snarg kidnap someone who was a member of this group, who was a member of the people who were holding Yarak? Well, the answer to that is they gave her up. Whoever it was in charge of Yarak, the Yarak forces, I really should just say, the new Yarak, let's call them that. New Yarak, they clearly were more interested in forming and maintaining an alliance with the party than they were about one of their former members who didn't really have a purpose anymore. There is no need for an administrator of their leadership, since they're basically just running Yarak at the moment. All our costs is technically still a part of the Union, but not really. And the other three states have completely split off from the Confederacy. As I've said many times, there is no Confederacy anymore. So they basically sacrificed her up to this. Now, Zerial figures this out, and she and Guido approach her and say, look, you don't have a job anymore. Would you like one? I actually really liked this. I'd like to say I planned this as the GM, but being wholly honest, I didn't. It did not occur to me. So the party, for some time now, each party member has taken the leadership feat, which allows them so many elites, is what I call them. And I require it to have an in-game representation of the in-lore fact that the party members are becoming leaders. The way I do this usually is you take the leadership feat, you can have so many elites, and then you can be a leader, in charge of a company, for example. But in that company, let's say your overall leadership capacity, which has to do with your charisma and your leadership level, is 3. So you could have like a chief administrator and a bodyguard and an accountant. And all 3 of these are elites, people who actually have names and stats and otherwise are better than normal people, actually have class levels, as we would usually say in D&D. And those elites are directly your followers, right? Make sense? So the party has taken these feats some time ago, and they've been slowly recruiting these elites for a while. Snarg has several people who are going to be squad leaders for his group. Guido has the blacksmith of the situation. Zerial's been recruiting spies. It never occurred to me they'd try to recruit a politician. And yet I love it because it's a brilliant idea. Lunacha Seeker is a perfect fit for what the party needs, in specific, Guido. Now, Guido has been working on something for some time, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about this in this story thus far today. But Guido has been founding, slowly, bit by bit, a trading and shipping company because he wants wealth and power. Not for its own sake, of course. Guido actually is trying to effect change on a large scale, and he recognizes that he needs the affluence and the backing in order to be able to effect that change. Make sense? So he'll be doing several important steps to that in this story thus far, and across the sessions I'm covering. So he recruits. That was weird. Ah, what in the world? I've never seen that happen before. Let's just reset to daytime. I've literally never seen that happen. I'm. Oh, I know why that happened. I know why that happened. Sorry, guys. Sorry. Anyways, so wow. Let's just do that there. Where was I? Oh, yeah. So Guido decides to recruit Lunacia Seeker and says, look, I need someone who is an administrator. He basically needs a CEO. He will overall be in charge of his company, of course, and reap the benefits of his company. He will be the person on the owner list. But he needs someone to be the chief executive officer, someone who's actually running the place. He's an adventurer. He's going to be off busy. He can't do that. So he offers her a very lucrative, potentially lucrative position as the head of a burgeoning company with the backing of an adventurer, several adventurers pushing it. That's a pretty sweet gig. She has to think on it overnight, but she does eventually decide, yes, she'll go ahead and join this new company, which I'll go ahead and give the name now, even though Guido in character didn't actually design it yet. Aesir is actually what he calls it, Aesir Shipping. Aesir, if you're curious. Now, after these interactions, after having successfully done this, Guido was exhausted. Now, if you're watching this, you probably haven't been watching the live session, so I'm going to tell you, periodically Guido will ask me, am I tired? Now, he's been doing that on purpose because I informed him many sessions ago that, except under certain circumstances, he didn't need to sleep anymore. I would deliberately go out of my way to tell him, especially early on, you're not even remotely tired, even though you've been up for 4 days. You're not even fatigued. And yet, every now and again, for reasons he hasn't quite figured out yet, at least as of now, and by now I mean the stuff you're seeing now, not now from my perspective, because I'm like a billion sessions ahead of you. But from this perspective, he hasn't quite figured out why this is yet, what the connection point is. So he is suddenly exhausted. Oh, so tired. He literally is having trouble. He has to roll saves to make it to his bed. No joke. But he makes it to the bed, and he's like, oh. The moment after he plops his head down, he opens his eyes, he's like, oh, and he feels so much better. He's just, it's like, I'm sure some of you out there in real life have had that thing where you just collapse in bed and you wake up and you feel like it's been a few seconds and it's actually been like 8 hours or whatever. That's what he just went through. So he's like, oh man, I feel so much better. And he gets up and stretches and he runs his fingers and toes through the grass that he's standing on. And in case you've lost track, Guido was on the ship, the Maiden's Deceit, an airship in the sky. But now he's on the grassy knoll. He's not in his armor either, which is also a bit of a point because Guido is almost never outside of his armor. He actually makes it a point to not even allow his armor to be removed most of the time. So Guido just feels great. Everything is fantastic. He is exactly where he should be. And he looks around, he stretches, and he can see, this grassy plain just about as far as the eye can see. It takes him a moment to realize he's seeing a reflection over there. He tilts his head at it, and he looks at it for a little while longer, and it takes him a moment to realize what he's looking at is a giant tower of glass. I really hope some of you remember the last few times the glass towers have been referenced. It's been a while, admittedly. But he sees it, and it's hardly defined. It's so smooth that he basically can only tell he's looking at it because it's reflecting, what's coming back at him. And as he starts approaching it, he can, of course, see his own reflection in it. A bit of the tower slides open. And when I say slides open, I mean it literally just, like, as if it melts away. And it's a huge entryway leading in, the kind that would allow a normal-sized Lugian, who are, many dozens of feet tall. Well, that's a bit of an exaggeration. They're much taller than Guido is. It would allow a normal-sized Lugian in, and when he comes inside, he notices it's like his old hearth back at his family hearth back at Granite Home, amongst the Granite Home, I should say. There's the large-sized banquet table that he used to sit at when he was a kid, and that's where his mother and father had taught him about engineering and this whole new thing, this railway system they're building, and it fascinated him. And there's all these signs of the Granite-Holm clan all over the place, and he feels so at peace. He feels so comfortable here. He gets up, sits up on the table, just kind of stretches out. This is where he used to sit when he used to, eat and dine with his friends. There's no one else here, by the way. He's just taking in the memories as if he was actually going back to his old ancestral hearth. And he remembers an old mite friend of his who had actually invented a device that enabled him to eat at the same table because a mite is like the size of a Lugian's lower leg. And he's just basking in the moment. And I ask Guido a very important question. I say, would you like to stay or not? And Guido, the player, after considerable thought, says, no. So what happens is he feels this sudden reassuring presence reside upon him and says, it doesn't literally say, but he gets the impression of the communication of, it's okay, when you're ready. And he kind of stretches a bit and he realizes he's sitting on his bunk, back on the maiden's deceit. Out of his armor still, by the way. Guido never checked this, but he actually still had grass stains on his feet. So Guido, realizing that he probably just had some weird-ass dream because he was really tired, just gets up and puts his armor on. It's not unusual to think that he had taken his armor off to sleep. I mean, shrug, right? But, he puts his armor back on. It's all good. We'll be good. This is actually the specific point in time at which Lunacha shows up, makes her decision and decides to join Aesir. There's some tidbits about that. So a gift arrives for Snarg, basically just on the ship. I want to remind you the ship doesn't really allow visitors per se, so the fact that there was just a gift on it was considered a little unusual. It turns out the gift was actually left at the hangar bay door, specifically addressed to Snarg. So it wasn't anything big conspiracy thing. And it was a piece of equipment, I forget what it was, but it was custom designed for him. Custom tailored, custom crafted, custom woven. Shortly thereafter, Zariel vanishes. Zariel heads out in order to do some stuff off camera. My sister and I have decided not to share the full details of what she did off camera yet. We know the full details of it, of course. I GM'd the whole section. It was quite a while because she was off for a bit. Nevertheless, while she's gone, the camera stays focused on Guido and Snarg. Snarg looks at one moment, and there's this dossier, this big old folder with tons of info basically on his door. And he starts looking at it. What the heck is this? And it's all this information about some guy, a half-elf specifically, named, tell me I wrote down his name. Alonzo, there it is, Alonzo of Firebeard, who is listed as this vicious, brutal killer, a deadly murderer, and it gives tons of information and tons of evidence on what he's done in the past, and it gives incredibly detailed information on a killing that he is about to do in the present. The implication is obvious. It doesn't say anything specifically. It doesn't say, go take out this guy. But Snarg figures that out on his own. He's like, okay, got it. This is clearly part of the House of Asmora's deal with him, that they're going to give him information so he can start going after the bad guys, which is what Snarg really wants. Kind of an uncomplicated perspective, if you will. So, is this? Yeah, it is. As he takes the information in the dossier is a little detailed. By a little detailed, I mean people shouldn't actually have access to that level of information. It's a little suspicious how detailed it is. Regardless, they decide to go ahead and borrow the ship because the next assassination that's listed, the next killing that he is slotted to do, is actually at Danby's outpost, which is not too far from where they are because they're still docked at Yarak. So they take the maiden's deceit, fly up to Danby's. They spend some time there. This is when Guido starts building Aesir shipping and actually formally names it and a few things. He basically starts making a deal with several skilled blacksmiths in the area. What Guido effectively does, I don't want to give you the whole details, but what he effectively does is he decides to go ahead and agree to basically allow them to operate under cost or at retail, basically, so that he's not charging them extra for metals or anything like that, so that they'll push out their good goods, so that that will generate consumer desire, so that at that point they can start charging more, and then the implication, the gentleman's agreement, is that then they will start pushing some of a percentage of their overall profits up, rather than him charging them directly. So they basically become his employees rather than them being another chain in the supply chain. Make sense? And that actually goes over quite well. They like that idea. We'll get rich and you'll get rich too. A cooperative thing. So Guido starts arranging, with Lunaccia's help, this trade empire, and it actually goes very, very well. I'm going to summarize it because it'll actually come up in a future episode that I've already done that you have not seen yet. And in this episode, it will be remarked how well this overall process goes, partially because of Lunaccia, partially because of the fact that he hit a market that hadn't really been hit all that hard that well, or that quickly. And he starts getting metal shipments going, and shipments of leather and that kind of a thing, and getting actual caravans and a few actual ships that'll actually go along the water, all sorts of stuff like that. He does all sorts of stuff like that. I'm not going to bore you with all the details, but it's awesome. He is building the economic empire. It's the very first steps of it, his first trade route, if you will. While he's doing this, Snarg is trying to look into the assassination situation, okay? Now, I keep calling it assassination because that's what it is. They find that out. They find out that this is a member of the Bloodied Flock, and that he is performing an illegal assassination. Now, I know I've talked about the Flock and the concept of legal assassination before. It's one of the many things the Daracost established when they founded the Daracost Accords. The idea here being that assassination can be done legally if you're willing to jump through the hoops and bureaucracy and paperwork and money necessary to make it legal. And one of the biggest requirements of that is you have to have a valid reason. If you say, I want to kill someone because I want their stuff, that is not considered a valid reason. If you say, I want to kill someone because I don't like them, that is not considered a valid reason. If you lie and say, I want to kill someone because here's a legitimate reason, and you are found out to be lying, you are arrested for attempting to provoke an illegal assassination. In other words, assassination is legal under very specific circumstances. Make sense? So this whole the concept of illegal assassination still going on is actually really puzzling to the party. They don't know a whole lot about the Bloodied Flock, so they're not really super versed in this. Zariel does. Later on, she will chew the party out for talking about this, because she'll be like, no, it was a legal assassination. You don't understand. Because even to someone like Zariel, someone who worked with the undermarket, the concept of an illegal assassination being taken out by the Flock is almost unheard of. The backlash and negative effects for performing an illegal assassination are huge. You would have to be an extremely skilled assassin to get away with that. I think you know where this is going. So the party investigates. I want to describe the scene a little bit for you, because I really want to get this into the minds of anyone watching. And of course, if the players rewatch this, then I want you to be reminded of this. What they find is they go to the house of the supposed victim, and they look in the window, and they see there is a reed shark there, lying dead, obviously gutted on the floor, and in full view of the window. Now, a reed shark in this context was basically a pet. Something similar to a guard dog. Reed sharks being used as guard dogs is actually extremely common. So they're like, okay, yep, he's dead. And they go ahead and notify the authorities. Danby himself, they actually get a hold of him, try and figure out what's going on. They get a hold of the local constabulary. They actually bring in the detectives and the local guards force, who, if you'll remember, are actually directorate forces posing as local guards, in order to look into the situation. Now, as they're going through this place, they come across a few things that don't really line up. The reed shark was there, obviously butchered and killed, and yet the gentleman in question who was killed in his sleep in a very non-violent way, in a way that if someone hadn't, if not for the reed shark, in other words, if they hadn't shown up at that door, they would have just assumed he died in his sleep. There's no untoward anything showing a cause of death other than simple, disease or heart failure or something along those lines. The cause of death was death, kind of a situation. They find that extremely suspicious, because if you're going to kill off your target like that, Why kill the reed shark? Now the party, I believe, I don't actually remember if the party said this or if the detectives, but several people said, "Oh well, obviously whoever it was did it just got tripped up by the guard dog." But that's not true either, because as Snarg discovers when he does his tracking, whoever came in to kill the gentleman on the second floor story of the building came in through the second story window and then left, never even interacting with the reed shark. So there's another set of tracks downstairs leading towards the reed shark and then away on the bottom floor. Someone killed that reed shark specifically so that it would get someone's attention and make it clear that this was not just a natural event. The party decides that's not worth investigating. Let's go after the guy who did this. They happen to have his address of his temporary residence right there in the dossier, which I want to remind you is information that basically there should be no way to determine. Like, there's only a couple ways that you could actually get that kind of information. Like, if you had perfect scanning technology, or if you had, like, the ability to read minds or something is what would be required to figure that out. So they go to this house, and they see him, and it's clearly him. It's the guy on the dossier. He's a little disguised, but not particularly. And he introduces himself as fake name. I forget what it is because it doesn't matter. You know, hi, I'm fake name. Oh, what's going on? And the party manages to talk their way into his room, which I find hilarious. So they manage to talk their way in, and then they, after having successfully diplomatied their way that far, they then immediately bungle it by saying his real name in their first sentence. Like, so it's literally like, so Alonzo of Firebeard. They don't even get farther than that because he immediately bolts out the window and activates a invisibility woven effect. Or maybe he was a mage, and he did it that way. They're not sure. But either way, they go to try and track him. Snarg barely, and I do mean barely, manages to find the guy, tries to disarm him, and then actually manages to pull his daggers off him, and then he basically vanishes. The guard nearby first thinks Snarg is a madman because he's a null grappling with the air. But after they managed to talk him down, it took some rolls because, you know, you're fighting an invisible assassin. Yeah, how much have you had to drink today, sir? After a few successful rolls, they convince him it's not a big issue. They're not really hurting anyone. Snarg takes the daggers from him, which to this day have not been identified, by the way. I have a rule in my campaign. The moment you identify a thing, that's when its stats are established. So they've been kind of waiting on that because they want to identify it with, like, the best skill possible. But anyways, so they've got these frickin' daggers. And he's gone. He is, like, teleported away or something. And they're not even 100% sure what happened to him. They find out later that one thing that exists is the ability to basically have an emergency exit, like a stone, like a little pebble or whatever, which you can just pop and then emergency cast the spell Exit on yourself. For those of you not aware, Exit is a yellow magic spell that teleports you someplace safe. And it's part of the spell that it puts you someplace safe. There's no twisting this. There's no worming around this. Wherever you end up is someplace that is safe for you or whoever's going with you at that point in time. Okay? So he's gone. Lord knows where. And they're like, ugh. Well, whatever. They try to investigate a little bit more. They don't really find too much additional than that. They get back to the ship, and about this time, Zariel has come back. It's been about 2 days overall. Zariel's been very busy. She looks very flustered. She's like, oh, God. And they get her back up to date. Zariel is mortified because she knows who Alonzo of Firebeard is. He's the leader of the Bloodied Flock. A little bit of background on the Bloodied Flock, real quick. The lower rank you are, the smaller jobs you take. The higher rank you are, the bigger jobs you take. Your rank is mostly about how qualified you are. Now, naturally, you get paid more if you're higher rank, but not because you're higher rank. It's because you're getting more higher paying jobs. Make sense? So, you know, someone who's contracted to go after a corrupt mayor versus someone who's contracted to go after a corrupt general with an army in between you and him, the latter is going to be something that goes to a higher rank assassin. Make sense? Alonzo is the highest ranked assassin, obviously, being the leader of the group. He is a very vivacious and interesting person. He likes to portray himself differently based on who he's interacting with. He is an incredibly skilled liar and a very skilled and very long-term career assassin. He is he had an item on them, which the party actually confiscates. They still have this. I haven't actually done anything with this yet. It's an envelope. Just a plain old envelope, except if you open it up, it's a bag of holding. So you can literally reach your whole arm into the envelope, just like, like this right here, kind of a thing. And inside this envelope is a huge amount of gold and a number of contracts, assassin contracts. Now, they all seem like they're normal and official, except for the fact that they are lacking all of the proper woven and physical things that would certify them as legal contracts. In other words, these are illegal contracts, and ones that have very high paydays. In this exact case, for example, the assassination of the gentleman in question, he was someone who had failed in the arena at Danby's, okay? And there was a lot of people who lost a lot of money on him. And so there was a wealthy Banderling woman in a nearby town who had spent a lot of money betting on him. And when he folded and basically, abandoned the match, surrendered, she lost a lot of money. So she spent a lot of money to get him killed. And literally, this is the reason she wrote down, because screw him. She did this knowing that even though it was not a proper reason, if you attach enough money to it, someone will actually take up the job and perform an illegal assassination. And there are a lot of illegal assassination contracts in that letter. Mr. of Firebeard is very busy, constantly trying to arrange deaths that don't look like deaths. See, in the case of a legal assassination, you kill the person, then you walk up to the guard and say, here. In an illegal one, you make it look like they weren't killed at all, which throws that whole Reed-Shark thing into question yet again. But moving along. Having discussed all this, Zariel then lies to her party. See, what Zariel has been doing is she has been organizing a peace treaty between two forces. Forgive me, I don't remember if this is a reveal or not, because I don't remember if it's been discussed in the story thus far. But she has been working beside the forces controlling Yarak and the Directorate. And the forces controlling Yarak are, drumroll please, the Vyotians. Now, she has actually, in her off-camera time, basically arranged for those two forces to join forces. Yes, really. She has actually arranged for the Directorate, the most powerful military force on the continent, and the Vyotians, the most powerful spy network, or whatever it is they are, on the continent, to join forces. If you're not aware, both of these forces have been portrayed consistently as either villains or, at the very least, antagonists to the party, pretty much up until recently. She intends to join this unified force once it's done. Now, she knows that the party won't really go along with that well, so she lies to them. She says, oh, it's Yarak unifying with with all our costs, and that's what she's trying to help assist with. And so there's this big treaty signing thing that's going to be happening at sea. Now, this is brilliantly designed. What I mean by that is there's a merchant ship leaving from here, which happens to contain a Directorate agent on it. There's a merchant ship leaving from here, which happens to contain a Vyotian on board. And these two will happen to be going to intersect within range of each other around here, where they will meet and trade supplies, as is normal. All merchant ships do this, and then they will both go on their separate ways. At the point at which they meet, I think it's the Directorate's going, or no, I think it's the Vyotian person's going to the Directorate ship. It doesn't matter. Point being, one of them goes to the other ship, and then they're going to stay on that ship and hammer out the treaty between the two people in the cargo hold, literally on the barrels. There's no big escort, there's no big defense, there's no pomp, there's no circumstance. Nobody should know about this happening at all. So while Zariel is discussing her own things and trying to figure out what's been going on with Alonso and talking with Guido about some of his things, Snarg gets another one of those dossiers, and it lists a new target. Someone who is a female Sclavi, who is a very skilled green mage, and she has been apparently ordered or contracted or whatever to kill the Vyotian and the Directorate representative. I remind you again, This is the kind of information. Nobody should even know that this peace treaty is happening. Certainly, no one should know that someone knows that this peace treaty is happening, that this attempt at an alliance is happening. This flings up all kinds of red flags for the party, but they decide to go ahead and treat this information as genuine, and they spend an awesome session. Let me take an aside really quick here. I know this is about story stuff, but as a GM, one of my favorite moments is to have a target and have the players and basically tell them to go. Figure it out for themselves, you know. I love the planning. I usually refer to this as heist mentality because that's usually how it's expressed, but it's not necessarily just stealing something. You know, they have to get to these ships and save them and organize this whole thing, and they're just spend several minutes planning exactly how to do that. I love that. It's some of my favorite stuff to work with as a GM. Moving on. So they plan this all out. They send their ship over, grab the Sentinel, who is the Viosian representative. He's in disguise, of course. Bring him up to the Maiden's Deceit, go over to the other ship, and this whole time they're looking for this Sclavi woman. Now, they never actually find her technically, but they do find the Directorate agent, which is a Banderling gentleman, I believe. And they take him up top, and so Snarg, who has basically supernatural ability to track, has spent time marking her, which gives him a bonus to discover her. I mention this because when they get to the deck of the second ship, taking the Directorate assistant, like he's right there with them, someone comes out of the captain's cabin, and the captain of this merchant vessel is the Sclavi woman, the assassin. So they all freak out. Oh god! Zariel literally teleports away, leaves, taking the Directorate associate with her. So they're safe off on the Maiden's Deceit, but that leaves Guido and Snarg on a ship with an angry green mage, a high-level green mage. She summons her aspect. Her aspect is basically Leviathan, a giant sea serpent who is very powerful. It's a pretty awesome boss fight. He does a lot of fun stuff with his abilities, literally tossing them overboard, sending them up into the air. There's a few moments where they were tossed so far into the air that they actually had an additional turn of action as they were plummeting. And for example, Guido, as he's plummeting through the air into the water, is like, "Cure, cure, quick, cure! Oh God!" Snarg utilizes his geomancy powers to their furthest. He basically burns out his mana pool in its totality, trying to bring both her and her aspect down. Guido tries valiantly to avoid being in the water. I remind you, they're out at sea at this point. So the sea floor is a few thousand miles, thousand feet that way, straight down. And he can't swim. So this is an especially deadly battle for him, and he ends up in the water several times. Snark has to rescue from him. He rescues himself from it one time. There's this whole thing. They actually end up sinking the ship in the course of the battle, and manage to just barely get everyone off the ship and get off to the lifeboats. I'm like, oh god, oh god. And then the Maiden's Deceit shows up to give relief, from Yarak, obviously. Yarak offering relief to these two people, or to these poor belligerent people. They don't let them on the ship, but they give them more life rafts and food, and they point them in direction of where they need to go to get back to shore. And then they leave them there, probably to die. I don't know, who knows. Now that's basically at the end of it. I hate to summarize a big epic battle like that. It was a very awesome battle. But that is effectively where we have reached right now. There is a Viosian ambassador and a Directorate ambassador on board the Maiden's Deceit, hammering out an alliance for a new amalgamate organization. And it was all caused by the players. They're the ones who initiated this alliance, Zariel specifically, but the party in general, and they're the ones who allowed it to go forward. I love it. I'll see you next time, guys.